people here in the room, but I do stream it so that we can have other people join in if they want to. So that's now live, and let's just do names super fast. I'm AJ, you are?
Justin.
Carlos.
Anthony.
Dallin.
Niles.
Taylor, also known as Craig.
Ryan.
Austin.
Travis.
JoJo.
All right, JoJo, take it away.
All right, my screen's up on your streaming stuff.
Yeah, everything's good.
All right, cool. So I've been really interested in trying to build web apps similar to how frameworks do it, but without requiring a framework, so using vanilla JavaScript. And I've been investigating multiple different ways to do that, and these slides will be lacking. And part of why they're lacking is I was investigating multiple things that I just couldn't wrap everything together in time. One of the things is I'm pretty sure I can get what I've figured out, at least not this example, but another example that I've worked on. I'm pretty sure I can get it working server side, so server rendered vanilla JavaScript components, you know, and mimic similar stuff to what Quick does.
Anybody familiar with Quick?
Yeah.
Gas station?
The gas station?
Nope.
No, the framework that does callback component loading with, they're supposed to, aren't they the ones that are supposed to have that server side
It's
heuristic analyzer?
resumability instead of hydration. So I doubt I could match every single thing that they include in their resumability, but I could give more or less the same effects just with vanilla JavaScript. At least that's my theory, but as that, it's not in this talk. In any case, let's see. Ooh, this is slow.
Wait, do you think that maybe they wrote their framework in JavaScript?
Yes. But then once you use it, you get the 9,000 dependencies.
Oh,
Yeah.
bonus.
So that's my info. If you, I guess I could zoom in, maybe, maybe not. Oh yeah, that's right. Let's see if it works. No, it's not going to work here. I have key bindings to do, you know, left, right arrow, and I apparently didn't make exceptions for Control Plus, so I can't zoom in easily. Maybe I could up here. Let's see. If my mouse would stop jumping around. Easier said than done. There we go.
There it is.
There we go.
Success.
A little bit better. So you can find me. Those are my social links on all of those platforms. Prerequisites to this: if you don't have a browser, you don't have a code editor, and you don't have Node or Bund, you need those. You probably don't need this if you're here, though. You probably know that already. And that's my little spiel. I shared this last time. But yeah, node modules are the heaviest thing in the universe. I was trying to get some code highlighting added to these slides. That's what I've been working on this whole time, but it wouldn't quite work out. But I broke my, well, I guess I didn't broke framework list. Prism is a library, not a framework. But installing that added 9,000 files into node modules. I'm like, like, or wait, 900, not 9,000. Highlight added over 1,000. So it was still like 900 files just for code highlighting, which I'm not super a fan of. And that's my slide so far. So it just loops around.
All right.
But these slides, instead of being built in slide dev, are using one of the ways I figured out how to do vanilla JavaScript. So I'm gonna, oh my gosh, this mouse stuff is killing me. Alright, I'm gonna drag that back over here. And I'll drag the editor over. Let's see, oh boy. Oh, I just almost closed it. That would have sucked. Okay. Too much?
Good.
Is that fine for everyone in the back?
That's great.
All right. Oh gosh, don't do that. Let's close that. Come on. All right, so the entry file for this, other than Prism being added, nope, that's not right. There's my files, okay. So package.json, it only has Prism right now. Without that, considering it's not working, there's no other dependencies that I'm including other than things I've written. A lot of what I've figured out is in my utils function here. And these can be broken out. I think having a good like chunk of things you can just copy and paste, like, I mean, I've tried to include references to wherever I've gotten these or seen them, and some of them are modified from the examples. But like this one is from MDN, and it just enables code highlighting if you have the lit plugin in VS Code or in Vim. So you can see using a template string in JavaScript and you get highlighting for it. The other thing I've been liking here is these reactive signals, and it's a very small chunk. This is what I was talking to you about earlier, AJ, is this is the signal. You implement it like that. So you can create a signal, you change it by doing .value. You can listen to it by doing on, and you can disable or remove the listener by doing off on the on. And that's the code. It's what, like 30 lines? I don't know. Yeah, like 30 lines of code. And that's a little more verbose. I've also got a React hook version. It's doing the exact same stuff, just in the format where you can have an array with count, set count, and on. And then you don't have to do the dot value if you want to change your signal. I've gone over most of these in my last presentation, so I'm kind of skimming them. Helper function for fetch is summon, just fetches things and puts it into, like, gets the data right away rather than having to parse it. It does the JSON parsing. And this one I've looked into. This is one of the things I was experimenting with. So this is actually from View Vapor, and they've set up their the Vapor system to work without the virtual DOM. And so without the virtual DOM, you can build templates in a similar way to how Vue currently does it, but it all goes to just the plain DOM. And what's really fascinating to me about that is the server-side rendered and the client-side rendered versions of these Vapor templates look exactly the same, other than, like, instead of a dot render, it has a dot SSR render. And so they've managed to redo their core setup where, and this is why I'm confident I can get my components that I've figured out working across server side and client side. But I guess I can skim through these. There's more stuff from the Vue Vapor. There's another one that I find helpful. Okay, so this I've experimented with my own router. I was using Navigo, which I think Todd had told me about, but the way they have the project set up irritates me to no end. And so even though it's a single dependency, it's actually complicated to import, and you have to use something like Vivint. So right now, this whole setup does not need any compilation, no transpilation, nothing like that. You can just load it with a server and stick it behind Nginx, Caddy, whatever, Node.js, serving static files, whatever. So this is just a client-side router right now. Or actually, that just loads the routes. It's a little helper for me. And then this is the router, and it's based on looped nav aid. And it actually does very similar things to Navigo, but it is less. I think it's slightly smaller, and actually I ended up copying it because their ESM module also had the same problem that Navigo did, but their whole copy of the router is like 100 lines or something around there. And so I figured that was worth it to copy it over, and I'm likely going to change this around a bit in the future. And that's most of the utilities there. They're not super complex. They're pretty smallish functions. The router's probably the most complex function there. And right now, this is the index. I'll go ahead and delete that so it's not as, well, easier said than done. Let's see. All right, so this is the current index for the slides. It is using web components that are being added in an interesting way. At least I find it interesting. But other than that, it's just using these web components. So I have a slides craft, which I should probably rename this so they're more unique and you can tell the difference. But one is plural, one is just a single slide, and they just contain and add some of the functionality. The slides craft wrapper just pretty much handles which slide you're seeing and keeps track of the current slide. So as you use the keyboard navigation, it will increase or decrease the current index. Main is actually just loading these files. All it's doing is adding these objects, which are HTML files, which I also had here in index. So if you wanted to just add components by hand, you can add them like that. And the components are these. So this is the slide component. Oh shoot. I had found something similar to this, and I've modified it a little bit based on someone else's blog, and I thought I included a reference, but I don't have that reference handy right now. In any case, it has a template, and that is the style. So that is scope style to the template, and that's all it's adding template wise is that slot. And then it does some JavaScript stuff. So we do use a signal for the current slide, and I don't like classes. After using React before React hooks, I hate classes now. If I can avoid them. So I'm doing a way of implementing web component templates without classes, so it's functional. And so this is kind of how you have to do it. You have to wrap it with this reflect thing, and you have to take the HTML element. So it's a little tricky, but it honestly only adds a couple more lines than doing it in a class. And then you need to extend the prototypes. But once you've done that, you can call the methods that a web component would expect. That said, caveat, which I have not figured a workaround for, is to observe attributes. So to have a custom attribute on your web component, you have to set observed attributes or something like that. But it has to be a static get function, and those can only be declared in a class. So I don't know if there's a way to get around that yet. I haven't figured it out. So I ended up going with the signal version that tracks the value of the current slide through that, rather than tracking it based on the attribute. I was hoping that in the implementation here, you would have, let's see. So I wanted it to just be like current equals 0 or whatever the slide is. Whoops. So you would have the current that would affect the web component. It would trigger the observed attributes, and anytime it changes, there's stuff you can listen to, so you don't have to really use signals at all. But I couldn't find a way to get that working with, and actually I think that makes doing custom attributes on this style of component worthless unless there's a way to get that working. So if you really need to do web components with custom attributes, do not use the functional method. Use a class method unless I figure something out, and you know.
So what's the purpose of custom? One, it'd be really cool if you just did a to-do app live with this path. But two, what is the difference? What does it matter? Custom attribute versus not.
So just this, you can, using your web component like it's HTML, you can specify it there, but you could also update that attribute within the actual JavaScript of the web component.
Why not just use data current, and then you don't have to use a custom attribute, you're using something that's already part of the standard?
It's not about the attribute, it's about stuff built into two web components that it has stuff like an event listener for on attributes change, and you can just listen to that event listener, but without being able to tell it which attributes you're watching for, it doesn't work. That never triggers. So you can't actually watch for those changes to the attributes.
The attributes in your DOM and the JavaScript handling the thing, the element in JavaScript land are not the same. So attributes and properties are not one-to-one, and they don't update each other unless you tie updates to them, with the caveat of some attributes are part of the HTML standard, and we'll just get everything in there, like name, I think, is one of the examples. But you have to have like a thing that watches for changes and populates it in the other direction, or they don't update each other. And that makes some sense because in the HTML, all of the attributes are strings. All the values are absolutely strings. And
So attributes are HTML strings, properties are DOM.
properties are JavaScript object fields.
DOM objects, not JavaScript objects, right?
No, because it's in JavaScript land. JavaScript object. A property is in the attributes are just in the HTML.
Right, but what I mean is that it's not a JavaScript object, it's a DOM object. It's a C++ object exported to JavaScript. Like the memory reference and what, like anything that it's touching is through C++ land, not through JavaScript.
That is undefined behavior as far as the spec's concerned.
Okay.
So the main advantage to doing attributes that way is in the JavaScript of that component, you could then just say this.current and get the current slide based on this.current. And that's the main reason to do it that way, as far as I can tell. And you can also do things like, because you can have a getter and a setter on it, whenever the property gets changed, you can like parse int on it if you're trying to get a number, or you can, I guess not when you're setting it. You would probably make sure it's a string when you're setting it, but you could parse int on it when you're getting it if you're expecting it to be a number. So there's advantages to it. It just wasn't working in this scenario. But to go back to slides here, so most of the magic happens in this onConnected callback. There are a few other callbacks, like disconnected is where I turn off the slide listener, and if you have a click listener, you could do that there. Actually, I should add this one, so I haven't added that, and I probably should, to the disconnected. That way, if the component is removed, you don't have a bunch of keyboard event handlers just hanging out there like listening for stuff. So I forgot to do that. And then other than that, I've got this handle keyboard and handle click. They're only added to the slides craft so that it kept the this. So the correct this, and then it's executing slide shifter here, and that just handles the, let's see, right arrow, up arrow, and space all trigger going forward, left arrow, down arrow, and shift space all go backwards. So that's all this is handling essentially, and it's literally just finding the section element and passing those along to the go forward and go back calls, and then it just calculates based on the why am I spacing on its name? The signal, so it's the signal for current slide value. It's just calculating based on that and however many slot elements you have. And so you can actually get slot assigned elements and assigned nodes. Nodes will get all text inside of, so text and elements inside of a slot, and assigned elements will just get the elements. And so in the case of the slides, if anyone puts text outside of one of those slide elements, I don't want to deal with it. So I'm just messing around with the actual slide elements. And other than that, it's literally, let's see, where's my on event listener? So the signal on event listener is literally finding the section of the component and translating it to move the slides around. That's it. And then each slide, that's right. Okay, so in the slot change, so once slots get added, which is basically instantaneous for this case because it's loading in the HTML, it sets each slide to transform based on its index times 100. So it's 100%, 200%, 300%, whatever, based on your slides, and that's how it's handling the slides. Other than that, that's the wrapper component. And actually this slide component probably has way more in it than it needs. Like I've got all of that commented out. It's not using any event listeners. It's like this isn't even needed. Literally this goes over the nodes, and let's see if nodes length is greater than 0. So I think I have this set up so that slots data empty literally loops through the nodes, sees if there's any value in it. If it finds a value, it breaks and returns false. So hopefully it doesn't go through the whole array if there is a value. If it doesn't, then it does return true. And so if it's empty, we just want to go ahead and remove any random nodes, like any text nodes. I think for example, one of the things I noticed is, let's see. That adds nodes. So you would literally have empty text string nodes in there, and that's why I did that, is I'm like, because you can have a default value, and I guess I'm not using it for the slide, but for here, you could do so you could do that. That's a default value. And one of the first components I was testing, I realized that default value wasn't showing up, and I'm like, but it's empty. What's going on? And that's when I discovered, oh, that white space, the new line characters count as nodes. So I made that little function that it just loops over, and if if all the nodes are empty, it just removes each node, and that's about it. So it's really not doing much in this component other than that. Most of this stuff is boilerplate. And this is where, to Travis's point, if I wrapped this in, say, a function, I might be building a framework. And so I did not wrap it in a function, so it's not a framework.
Gotta keep it interesting.
But then how will you reuse it if it's not in a function?
No, I probably will wrap it at some point, if I'm being honest. But, you know, it'll still be a small amount that's necessary to get it working. And this was what I was working on as we started here. I was trying to get Prism to load the value of the slot and parse it and put the parsed value in an article, but I just haven't had enough time to work through that. But that is how this is working, and this looks like crazy right now. Well, that's fun. Let's do that. There we go. So literally all these slides, that's how it's working. It's using these web components. And it's a very simple setup, at least as far as slides go. I like slide dev, but it is far more complicated than this. It has a lot more options though, like you can do like different transitions and stuff, and right now I've basically got the transform of transition animated. That's about it. Like, and that's just in CSS. So it's fairly simple setup, but I do really like the idea of this is essentially a view component, a single file component in view. It works very similarly, except no framework is needed. You can copy that anywhere. You could add it into an index.html, and as long as you import the object, or if you want to do it through JavaScript, you've got single file component framework loading. Now, this does not show as much of the async stuff, which I went into async a lot more in my last presentation. Let me move Windows. Does anyone have any questions before I move off
Got
of this?
one.
Yeah?
In your slides HTML, at the very top, you got a JSCC
Yes.
element. What is that?
Okay, so that is from the other guy's blog that I saw. There is some instance where if you don't wrap those things, it can get funky, and I forget the reasoning. I meant to include a link to it, like, but it just prevents some collisions for some reason.
One group tag export from that file.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
What's the tag?
Huh? Oh yeah, I can show it. Hang on.
JSCC.
Yeah, so that's
JoJo's non-framework framework.
JavaScript craftsmanship components, I think is why. Oh, so JSCC is JavaScript craftsmanship components. That's what it stood for.
Not
Huh?
not a framework though. Just
Yeah, not a framework. TM or something. Something like it. Okay. Any other questions?
Not exactly a question, but last time I had to implement like a smooth sliding between views, right? It was like for swiping on a touchscreen. For some reason, I did all the animations in JavaScript frame by frame. I don't remember why I did that. That's
You're
this
glutton
thing's
for
not
so you can
punishment.
use spring effects, obviously. That's why you do it. So you don't get that as a default transition for CSS, right?
I think it was linear.
Oh. All right, never mind. I tried to save you.
All right. So let's see if I can pull my other editor over here. Oh, the mouse lag is killing me.
Yeah, I know, right? It's kind of weird. Why does that happen?
It's like fine on this screen, but over there it's awful.
I wonder what it is about that box that can't help that make a screen 30 times a second. New technology.
All right, so this is, I have not pushed all of these changes yet. and this is where I was hoping to cover even more of this in the slides, but this is my most recent rendition. Oh, I've got a lot open. I might close these first. Need some elevator music here. Alright, so that's not much. Again, 0 dependencies, although I guess I'm using serve Clyde, but I use the npx to do it because I don't want to install all the dependencies just for a static server. But
I
let's
want to
see.
admit using dependencies.
Exactly.
MPX.
I hide it. Alright, so I was using Navigo, and I switched to this router that I was showing the code for in that utils function. I'm going to clear this since it's not using Navigo anymore. And as you can see, it's a lot smaller. So this is not using Vite at all. The Navigo example I had to use Vite to get it working. But doing it this way, it seems to work. I guess that's all junk. Delete that. So the router is fairly simple. Oh, I suppose I can get this code running so I can demo that as well. Let's see.
Does your router support parameters? User/:ID?
Yes. What's
Wouldn't be a router without it, would it?
Router fully typed.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Wait, isn't
all
every
here.
router fully typed?
It's fully typed. I type it fully every time.
Exactly. See, Travis gets it.
I thought that all router parameters were strictly strings, and that was
A type.
Uh-oh. This was working.
You know, talk about TypeScript types where like a regex can be a type, meaning the evaluation of the regex can be a type.
The literal type, like router.params.user ID, that user ID part would be the type, because usually that's
A string.
just, well, the TypeScript is, I think.
It should be. URLs are strings. They're strings.
People want to narrow it further.
Like
Specific
string-
set of strings.
Like strings that begin with the letter A.
Strings that your app will handle.
I don't know. That,
This is complaining about something. Let's get to the code. All right, so this is, oh, it's complaining about convert. I must not have something for convert in here. Well, the demo isn't working right now, so I'm not gonna figure that out right now, but this one, instead of using the single file component version, it's using JavaScript files. I think I actually like this version better. The single file thing is kind of cool to me. It's interesting. I didn't realize you could do that. But at the end of the day, I'd much rather doing like an import of a component and having that done. And it was a lot of jiggering to get that other setup working. And so other than that, it's importing the main.js file. The main.js just is loading the router, and each time you click a route, it moves to that route. Let's see, so home is a very simple component. I think it should have a counter on it, and this was the setup. I've showed most of this in the last talk that was from, nearly a year ago now. But what's different is the router and not needing Vite, although I don't know why it's breaking right now. Let's see, so. It's possible I updated one of the components that convert is importing here, and so maybe that's why it's actually breaking.
Well, it is job security since it is your
Exactly.
framework or non.
It's not a framework.
Then you're the one that needs to fix it.
No, but to that point, I think, let's go back there. Where is that? I don't know why these are on different freaking workspaces. It's kind of driving me insane right now. Let's see. So, being plain JavaScript, there really is not much here. Like, this is the whole root. There's some patterns, and this is where I had hoped to get a list of the patterns I'm using so that, you know, I could share those with people, and I didn't get that list fully made. And I do not have it with me. I think I wrote it down on a notepad, and it's at home. So, there's like loading and unloading a root, and I'm using a similar pattern to how the signals work. Each of these are using a very similar setup to this root. So if we go into where setup fiat convert is coming from, it's in the utils folder, but it's doing it's got a set value function, a render function. Render is literally, for this one, I believe it's just a normal text box input field, so it's just setting the value of it. You could do, I'm pretty sure I have one of them doing inner HTML, and where is it? You can also add classes like this. Where is the HTML? I guess it's not in here. In any case, it is using the same signal setup. It's using a store here. All this store is doing is creating the signals, and then importing that file. You get a global store in all the other files you use it in. So importing loaded roots or importing fiat value, whatever, all of those are in sync, and if you change roots around, it will keep the signal value between the roots, and so you get a global store like that. But if you don't want it to be global, you can literally just declare the signal inside of the component. So I think I'm doing it somewhere here. Maybe not. Regardless, you could just as easily just go into one of these and, you know, constant the equals create signal whatever, and then it's not a globally scoped, it's scoped to that function. Like, that's it. It's pretty simple, and you get the reactivity. The way I have these functions set up, I don't love them. I've been looking at other ways of doing this setup, but it does work fairly well. The components update, it's very reactive. You might be able to make it faster, but I don't know how. Like, maybe some of the frameworks have some, you know, black magic in them that like optimize things that I'm not using. But what I like about this is it's all plain JavaScript. You don't really need to know the deep internals of a framework, and you don't need to learn React and then switch to Vue and need to know different methods and stuff. These are all things that can be used across frameworks. You can import, you could use this signal, create signal thing in Vue. You could use it in React. I believe the point I made last time was at the last employee type job I had, I was I was working on a React project, and React made a new release, and for several versions, they had a bug, sorry, not React, I think it was in Redux or something like that, and they had a bug in Redux, and it was causing a leak, and we didn't have a fix. I didn't know this stuff at the time, but had I wanted to, I could have implemented a signal like this, kept our app working, got my sprint done, whatever, and actually been able to complete my tasks. But instead, I'm either like between well, do I make this take longer and try and report to React that they have the bug, and then you figure out, do I see if they'll fix it fast? There's a lot involved if you've ever made a pull request to one of these frameworks. Short of Bun, actually, I will say the fastest experience I have reporting an issue has been Bun, and I found a few bugs there, and he's on top of it. Like, I've literally gotten messages from him 5 minutes later, like, oh, can you give me this log output? I return that, and he's like, yep, it's a bug. I'll get that fixed by tomorrow. And so usually that is not the experience you have when making a pull request or making a bug report issue or anything like that. So I advocate knowing these patterns can get you past problems that like frameworks might have. It's still beneficial to know these things. It's still beneficial to learn just JavaScript patterns in general and how to implement them efficiently. One of the things I saw recently that I think was on Twitter, I think I may have shared it in the Discord chat for Utah Stack.js here. I think it was with a memory leak in set timeout, not cleaning up
Garbage collection.
Yeah, garbage collection stuff, yeah. Yeah, and it's like, if you know about that kind of stuff and you know it's possible, you can orchestrate your code in a way that you won't get those garbage collection issues. But if you don't know about it, then you could introduce a set timeout and think, well, it's not an interval, it's going to end like no big deal, it'll all be cleaned up. And then every time, your route changes and it comes back in the set timeout, suddenly you're building up that memory leak of garbage or non-garbage collection, and you get slowness in your apps and stuff like that. Yes, so any questions about this stuff?
I have a question.
Yes.
So what have you learned and what progress have you made since your last presentation? Because while you're thinking of that, I'll give you some more context. When I saw the last presentation, my takeaway was basically, I want to be able to author JavaScript, CSS, HTML in a component manner, meaning like a single file ideally, and have a component-driven architecture without a framework. And I want to be able to import components from one file to another. And I think that wasn't quite ready yet. The importing of components from one file to another was like one big file. So have you got past that part, and what's like the overall goal?
So what I was planning to do, before going down too many rabbit holes trying to assemble stuff, which a lot of this stuff I think I will have done for the conference, for the Utah JS conference presentation, but I was planning to show the single file component version of the slides, because one of the things I think you asked it is, how do you do nested components with this code here? Yeah. And it's not as obvious how to do that. And I was planning to do side-by-side single file component version, and this is if you're using all JavaScript version. I've figured that out. I don't have it in here right now. I think I have it in a separate project. But it is relatively easy to do nested components with this method, the JavaScript method. You can just import them. You can organize them. It's really more of an organization thing. if you have a way you like to organize your components or your files, really more of a file system thing, most frameworks tend to like set your roots go in a roots folder, your components, your compositions, your blah, blah, blah. Like they have folder naming schemes already, and you tend to follow those schemes based on the framework. And so with this, there's nothing enforcing that. If you like how React organizes their their components and setting up an app with React, you could do all the folder structure that React does. You could also do it the Vue way. You could you could do it the Svelte way, whatever. Like you're not limited by that, but that sort of setup helps you organize your code as well. Having the file naming, knowing where the files will be, knowing where, if you've got simple components or they're a basic wrapper that adds styling to an input field, but it doesn't really add any JavaScript on top of it. You might want to keep those simple components separate from this component is actually a search thing with type ahead and, without using a data list, because data list works great, but it's unstylable. You cannot customize the style of that thing to any degree of the quality.
Why would you want to?
It looks decent on yours, but on Linux it looks like garbage.
Well, then make a pull request to Linux.
You already discussed sending pull requests in open source software.
You're not allowed to do it in Python anymore.
Well, you have to do it over email, right? 'Cause
No, you can't do it if you watch SNL. It's not allowed. It's now against the code of conduct, and most of us watch SNL. So
you do that?
SNL?
You watch SNL?
I haven't seen SNL in years unless it's a clip online.
yeah, isn't that?
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're talking about like doom scrolling and you see SNL incidentally.
Yeah, that's not watching SNL. And look, I don't know what they've done since, but the Mario Kart thing with Mandalorian dude was the best thing they've done in a while.
I haven't seen that one, but I'll
It's
look at it.
good. Yes, you have. I shared it with you.
Oh, I've seen that one, and I love it.
Wait a second.
That Beavis and Butthead skit is pretty.
I haven't seen the Beavis and Butthead one. Maybe I'll have to look that up. Sorry, to circle back to what you were asking, a large part of what I needed to figure out something solid is actually the router. And so I spent quite a bit of time this time figuring out how I want the router to work. And I found that one and modified it slightly, but I will probably modify that more because I would like one that both works with the history API, but also could work in place of Express, so you could just use the same router inside of Node or Bun or whatever and have it route the same way your actual front end stuff is working. So I was looking into that. That's one of the rabbit holes I went down. That has not borne fruit yet, but I think will shortly. But a lot of how you organize your app tends to be around how you're routing the components and routing to the pages and stuff like that. Someone asked about, does it support variables in the router? Router? I don't know.
The router?
You need to pick one.
I don't know.
Route or route, but not both.
At least I don't say rudder, okay?
The rudder.
It's route, by the way, because that way you can say route.
Root route?
Yeah, route to the
You gotta
route.
pick one or the other, man. No, I'm confused.
No, but those are different words.
So you could do something like that just as easy, and it would come through in a params object, I believe. And so you could get the params from the root. I forget that was you, right? Okay. So, yeah, you can do that easily enough with this, dang it, router? Did you say router?
Router.
Rotor,
all route.
rotor rooter.
Except for the root route.
Look,
So is-
I have lots of family and they all pronounce it differently. At least I can pronounce it differently. I've got an uncle who just says rut and, well, you better rutter that. I'm like, what? Like, yeah.
Not making your case as strong as you think.
He'll never say it root though. So, okay, sorry, someone was asking.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if the params object, does that have anything special based off of the path? Like the crypto?
I think it would be like params.crypto, so it would be based on the param name. Other than that, like if you did multiple, I think it would just all be named like that. So if you had crypto slash fiat, not fist, fiat, they would just be params.crypto, params.fiat.
Is
Yeah.
that reflected in the type? Like just,
Of course it is.
I'm saying.
Look, if you use the actual library, yeah, look,
Any?
totally. Yeah,
Amazing.
anything goes here, okay? Actually, I think there should be types on that. That's the funny thing. Let me see. And,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, mouse. Come on.
Let's see lazy.js.
Oh no, I guess not. I thought I had types here, but I apparently forgot. Could have sworn I did types on that thing. Oh well. Yeah, so I think that's all I got. Unless anyone has any other questions.
I want to see you build a to-do app.
You want to see me build a to-do app?
Yep.
All right, let's see if I can pull this off. With the single file component version?
No, I'm not saying.
No, I want a multi-file component.
Prepare for disappointment.
Can we benchmark the to-do app?
I think you just.
Can what?
Can we benchmark the to-do app?
Can you get your
Sure.
to-do app to run as fast
To do MVC.
on localhost as my website runs in Salt Lake? You had to think about it.
Yes.
I hope so.
Here's my biggest question. This seems like a really awesome project, but in your own self-estimation, how good of an idea do you think it has been, as opposed to just using Remix or whatever?
The JavaScript version without the single file component, I love it. Like, I will never go back to a framework unless I am forced to for a job or something like that. I think there's still some pattern side of things that I can improve upon with it, but it works really good. I don't think, like, you might be able to min-max benchmark it and be like, this is 3 milliseconds slower than Svelte or something, but at that point
Excuses
I
already.
just don't care. Like,
Okay.
this, I would rather have as few or zero dependencies, no node modules. One of the other things I ran across just like a week ago is I have my blog, JoJo.io. It's running on Ghost, and Ghost triggers a Astro static file build of the website. My server that was running the CI/CD ran out of space, and I couldn't even run a command to remove files because it used up so much space. It was trying to add the command to the history, which would trigger an out of space error, and I could not run the remove commands.
You gotta use fish, not ZSH. Fish does it the reverse order, runs the command first, then adds it to history. Had this problem.
Okay. Yes. So this might seem like a digression, but Astro, I really liked the idea of it. I was able to get it to output a very clean version in plain HTML, and it was building it. But every time it installed new Astro, or actually, I don't think it was updating any Astro stuff. It's just been building the same version of Astro for like a year or more, or maybe even 2. Like, it shouldn't be re-downloading it. It's supposed to cache it in the Docker CI/CD, and yet for some reason there was 30 or more gigabytes worth of cached Astro modules and stuff, and so I end up like, there's no reason for it to run anymore because I'm probably going to be changing that setup. But I would like a static site that doesn't require gigabytes of data, that doesn't have to install or cache all of Astro or whatever it was using. Yeah, so I really like getting away from the bulk of node modules, and also it forces you to, like, if you want to add a package to your setup and you're like, do I want to add the 1,000 files? Do I want to add 20 megabytes or whatever of node modules? Or maybe like it's a gigabyte, like some of those things. I think like if you do Sharp or something, it is like over several hundred megabytes worth of data just to add that library.
Okay.
So avoiding that as much as possible. Sharp would be the example where I'm not going to figure out a way to image optimize and stuff on my own. So if I needed that, I might have to bite the bullet and use that one.
Yeah.
But for other things that are plain JavaScript, or like that router, like the only reason it wasn't working is because it does what I hate about TypeScript is TypeScript does not include the file extension, and when you bundle the TypeScript into JavaScript, it also does not include the file extension. So when you go to import a JavaScript file that has been bundled by TypeScript, you cannot import it in plain JavaScript. You have to do some sort of workaround, or you have to use Vite or some other transpiler, Babel, whatever, to transpile and import those just to use it. And I hate that.
Ryan, we figured that out today, didn't we?
Yeah.
Did you?
Figured out that you hate it?
Yeah.
Did you know that it was a problem?
Did you figure out a solution to it?
The next morning I woke up, yes, I thought of a solution. But
What was your solution? Don't depend on that
yeah,
dependency?
do a completely different thing. Yeah. That's the solution.
Like just a couple months ago, like I switched from .ts files to .js files, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't know how to import things anymore. Like I'm still like relearning JavaScript.
Wait, can't you?
You just
use
add a
import?
.js to the file name.
But you can't say like
import.
you can't say import from library name. You have to specify the exact file. And
If
there's
you're
no
doing
standard way for
vanilla.
the library to specify what file will work in the
You
browser.
can use a source map, and import source map, import map, that's it, yep.
Okay. Okay.
So, but it's,
I
Not
can
the
show
dream you might want it to
the
be.
way that will work without any bundlers. It is 5.5 lines of boilerplate, but it works. Will you bring up one of the Dash Hive projects and just show that, like the 2 lines up top and the 3 lines down bottom?
you mean the browser import rabbit hole thing?
Yeah. And it works in every, and we've had so many problems because we've had people use these libraries and they'll be using, the bleeding edge, like node unstable V whatever, right? And bundle phobia and like every type of weird packager you can imagine. We've refined this over several years
Okay.
to a couple of lines that will work everywhere. We don't know of any place that it doesn't work, because if we did, then we would have fixed it.
You're suggesting that I don't have to dig around in the individual files of the package to find which one will work in the browser for me to import it?
So first of all, you actually don't have to do imports. The browser will load whatever it is that you export into the global space by declaration.
Well, yeah, it's attached to the window object, right?
Right. So if you just put var at the top of, well, you'll see in just a second.
Yeah.
You're not.
I know.
Okay.
I'm pulling it up.
This seems like
Do one of the ones that we actually, or, well, I guess this is
First,
probably
I'm
just
going to
as
show
up to
this. Yes. So this is essentially the wrapper. You
Oh, zoom.
zoom. Yeah.
Zoom harder.
Yes.
Enhance. Zoom and enhance. Okay. So the wrapper is essentially this iffy. What's it stand for again?
It's just a function. It's just a
Yes,
function.
it's just a function.
It gives it scope.
Function that's immediately invoked.
Yeah, the iffy was the term that people created back in, what was it, 2008 to sound cool, and it hasn't aged. Oh, does it? I stand corrected. I figured that nobody knows what it means anymore, because it was just something that the Node people threw around in 2008 to sound cool, and I thought that people were over that.
Okay.
But maybe they're not.
So
what is happening.
the gist of what's happening is you're getting if it's type of or if object is type of module and you've got exports, it sets up the foo2, or it just becomes a plain object.
You can
But
check
inside
whether
here,
the console object has a console property.
sorry, what?
You can check whether console.console exists.
Console.console?
Yeah, like lowercase console dot uppercase console. It's a thing in Vivint browsers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I learned that today, actually.
Yeah, I don't know, but
I wouldn't depend on stuff like that. Global this is a good one. That one's standard. You can depend on that.
yep.
Surely browsers are never going to add like a console constructor to the console object, right?
But we have ways to solve these problems.
Okay, good.
Anyway,
No good. So the gist of this is there's some types at the top, and if you want to do JSDoc types and have them imported, you can import that, which adds it to window. You import it like this to get the types, and then you can combine the two like this and export it, and you get a module that you can then import, and it has both the types and the functionality. And so what AJ was wanting me to show here is one of these libraries where I actually don't know if this is one we've implemented.
Dash RPC might be a good one to use because it's relatively small. Well, this one's got a lot of types up front, and it makes it look scary.
Yeah, it does.
And then it's very, very big. This is probably the second most complex of the modules. So, the simplest one right now would probably be, it's Dash Gov. That one's pretty small, I think. But most of them have the pattern up at the top and the bottom. Well, all of them do. They're all meant to work this way. I don't use import. I don't. It seems to add a lot of complexity. I don't know what it helps. I've yet to hear anyone articulate how it solves a problem for them.
You can use import in the browser and on the server. You cannot use require in the browser without importing an entire package that handles require.
I do it just fine. But anyway, so it does this thing where it checks. So look at line 69. It's just doing a thing, and you have to use a TS ignore on it because TypeScript freaks out about it because it's self-referential. But if you just tell it to ignore it, then it actually recognizes the type just fine. But you can see that I'm typing this as type gov, and then I'm declaring it. It checks to see if module is an object, and if so, then -gov becomes exports. Otherwise, it becomes an empty object. Because this is declared outside of function scope, it's exported into the global namespace. So it's on global this. So if you look at global this, you'll get global this.-gov, or if you do window. Then window and -gov have to be passed in. I don't remember why window has to be passed in, but I believe that it has to do with one of the bundlers or something freaks out, and so we found that if you just pass in window, that it stops freaking out. We've done so much to get this to work with all the different bundlers through the ages. And then down at the bottom, so I explicitly attach window.-gov to window. This isn't necessary, but again, like, it's not necessary for the browser to understand it, but I believe it was necessary for the bundler to understand it, because each one of these lines represents one of the modern bundlers that has some sort of glitch, that with this specific way of doing it, it tricks the bundler into recognizing, oh, this is a browser program, or this is a Node program, so that, because some bundlers work with both browser and Node, and so this just makes it so that no matter which bundler you're using, no matter which configuration you're using for it, it will properly export it. So it looks really funky. You gotta pass in global this.window or empty object, that's for Node. Then you pass in the thing that you've already declared. Then you have to check a second time the type of module and then attach it to exports. So this is literally exporting the same thing 4 different times, but it's so that it works in every single bundler system. As far as we can tell, I mean, I think we've tried it with like a dozen different bundlers.
Hey, if it works, it works.
Yeah.
I just don't know why anybody in the larger programming community just makes fun of Node so much. Just so straightforward.
But it's not a Node problem, it's a bundler problem. Because the problem is that people want to support all of these different types. Like, we had a standard canonical thing, require. We had a standard canonical thing, window. And then people started making their own systems, the require JS's.
Require was only canonical in Node.
But it wasn't canonical, period, because there was no standard it was based on. Somebody just...
You just said it was canonical.
No. Sorry, not require JS, common JS, which is require. Require JS is defined.
Or was it AMD require?
Yeah, so and then there was AMD.
It's like requires, right?
Right. So because people, I mean, there are 2 ways that worked well. They're like, but the idea was that, oh, we're going to have these async loaders, and they're going to load asynchronously, but then you bundle them, and so then they don't load asynchronously. So then the whole purpose that you created this vast ecosystem of things that to create dependency trees and connect with one another, and then are going to hot load in the browser on demand, which like now Quick is kind of back to exactly what AMD was more or less. Not exactly, but anyway. So it's not Node. It's not like, oh, Node sucks, so we have to do this. It's people, when presented with an option that works predictively,
They hate it.
All right, I can rephrase.
Yeah.
I can rephrase. It's a wonder that the larger programming community makes fun of JavaScript so much. It's all very straightforward.
Okay, fair.
The complaint is the lack of a standard. The closest thing we have to a standard is browser JavaScript.
No, there are standards. People don't like the standards.
I like import. I'm fine switching off and not doing required stuff
I will do
anymore.
whatever the standard is, even if it's terrible. I like it. Yeah,
Well,
so the standard is now import and, to a lesser extent, window.
Well, but you kind of have fooled yourself, right? Because you're saying, oh, there's no standard way to figure out what file path it's going to load from, right? So you yourself have been fooled by these extensions, because the programs you're using, they're not JavaScript programs. There's some pseudo language that looks very similar to JavaScript that is specifically designed for a particular type of bundler. And if you're using a bundler that's not that bundler, then although syntactically a JavaScript parser can sometimes parse those files, although not always, but it can sometimes parse those files, it doesn't know what to do with it. So the standards that we've had still work today. The import, I want to get on the import bus. It's just that it doesn't. I think I looked up something just recently on can I use, and it like browser support is still basically like 75%.
For imports?
Surely import is universal at this point.
That seems
The
low.
keyword, or I don't know if it's called a keyword or if it's called what you call that. The keyword import will parse in browsers universally. The behavior of how to use it, like what you were just describing, is not universal. Like for example, let's say that you want to load a JSON object. JSON is actually part of JavaScript. We've known since, about 2002 that JSON is the primary way of communicating data over networks. And how do you import JSON?
Fetch.
As a
There's
string.
import insertion.
No.
Yeah,
You'll get a warning if you do
now,
that.
well,
you do have to end up
insert,
using
now
fetch,
it's weird
right?
for
But that's the thing. Like importing CSS is not part of JavaScript. JSON is part of it. Anyway, so and then there's like the
And
module
yet
path and
CSS
things.
has import.
And then just realistically, if you think about it, and I know that nobody's doing this, so it's a null argument. I agree it's a null argument because no one's doing this. But a web server is capable of statically analyzing the request going in and out, and it can understand script tags. That's not difficult to parse. That's not a big problem to understand. This string request came from this string of body. So all of that stuff to hyper optimize bundlers and figure out how do we arrange this so it can fit into the fewest TCP packets. A web server could do that with script tags. It can't do it with import because it would have to, well, maybe with the module spec, if the module spec gets adopted and it actually gets standardized and it stops changing. But a web server, you can't reasonably expect a web server to evaluate all JavaScript to determine what the interaction of modules is. But you can reasonably expect it to do the same thing that that everything has to do. Just look at a text file that has script tags in it and be able to pull out an href or a source sample. So
And that's what import maps are essentially.
so if the import maps work, but I think the thing was that they don't actually work across browsers yet. Can we bring up can I use and see if import maps are? I don't remember what it was, but every time over like 10 years now that I've gone to use import, I walk away from it again because people can't agree to just do a good thing.
You said
perfect has to be
import
the
or an
enemy.
import map?
I don't know how we would look it up.
So let me ask a series of stupid questions.
96.59% dynamic import modules, and import maps is 92%.
Okay, so if I were to attach everything to the window object rather than destructuring stuff with import, right?
Well, don't ever destructure, please. If you're going to use import, by all means use it, but don't destructure.
I have heard a few times, I don't know if this is true, but like
I like destructuring.
so I hate destructuring most of the time, but I do it for imports because I've heard a few times that that helps you spend less time tree shaking because it's easier to tell what code you're using.
That's all bull.
AJ doesn't believe in tree
Well,
shaking.
I've heard it depends.
No, the problem with destructuring is that then you write crappy code because all of your methods start to stutter and you don't have any organization to your code.
Well, yeah, I don't destructure anywhere besides imports. I do it for imports because I...
No. What I mean is if you have a package and the package is well scoped, because then you end up with everything's name stutters. So it's like create person, update person, da 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 da. It should be you import person and you call person dot update, person dot get,
But
whatever.
let's say it's a massive person library, and like,
Then
I don't
you
care
should
what
not,
structure,
you shouldn't be doing that. Like trim it down to what you need and stop Yagni. If it's a
Well-
massive person library, then Yagni.
You're
Well, I'm
really
mostly
not gonna
talking
like
about
my
libraries that
presentation
I-
next month.
Yeah.
It's got auto imports, which completely remove the import statements.
He'll love it.
Just use it.
I love, Go has auto imports.
Okay, I'm mostly talking about not how I
It's
design
even
my own
worse.
modules, but how I import modules that I need that I don't want to implement, like PDF Live.
So all the baloney about tree shaking is false. Because for things that implement tree shaking correctly, they can statically analyze the code because they still have to
Okay.
parse the code.
Okay.
And for everyone else, they're just blowing smoke up your butt because they didn't actually implement tree shaking. Most of the people who talk about tree shaking, if you actually go look at their library with their bundler of choice and you run the code, you will find that the tree shaking is not working. And then there'll be a GitHub issue. It's like, oh yeah, well, it broke in this release, and so we're going to re-enable it. So if you were to statically analyze code, you would analyze the code statically, and then you would know. Like TypeScript checker statically analyzes JavaScript, and it does a good job. It's almost as good as Zig or Rust in that regard.
So here's a hard example that suits TypeScript. So I was using like the Google APIs module in TypeScript. It's this massive library that does a gazillion things that you don't care about, right?
Oh yeah, that one's probably you're gonna have a hard time there because of the metaprogramming.
So yeah, when I import when I import Google APIs in a TypeScript file without destructuring, it takes like a full minute to compile. But I believe if I destructure what I need off of Google APIs, it's much faster.
Okay, well again, that could be poor implementation, right? Because logically, if you think about it, if it has to go through, like let's say you're destructuring, and it's like I'm going to grab foo and I'm going to grab bar. So it has to read the code, it has to parse it, and it has to go figure out, where this thing is.
Yeah.
So now,
destructure probably makes it easier.
well, but how? Because if you import, let's say that instead of importing it as foo and bar, you destructured, you import it as GAPI. Well, you would still parse and analyze the code, and you would just look for GAPI.foo, GAPI.bar. So, although I don't disagree that some people do a really poor job of their static code analysis, this is completely a property of them not walking the tree that they already had to build anyway, not a property of, oh my goodness, how will we ever figure out how to build this tree, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to re-implement TypeScript. I just have to put up with it.
Well, I don't know which part of the, you've got probably a million things in that stack. I don't know which part of it would be the part that is causing the slowdown. Is it necessarily the
Literally-
TypeScript checker?
Well,
I don't know.
yes, literally just that. Like, if I'm doing it in a .js file, then I can see that like the type linting takes a full minute if I use that library.
Okay, I don't know.
Oh yeah, certainly. Like, they're happy library.
There's a whole,
But it proves that like destructuring makes TypeScript faster.
If you don't destructure, you could still like generate a random dynamic value that you then pull off the object. And I think the compiler authors are like, I don't know what to do with that. I'll just allow all variable in.
Well, but again, like this is a thing, right? So if you were to do GAPI sub X,
Yeah.
one, TypeScript already knows what X is, unless it's a runtime value. And if it is indeed a runtime value, then you wouldn't be able to do structured and import, so you're back to the same problem. So that it's a null argument. People make the argument because they're lazy, or because they, realistically, yes, there's a bug in something somewhere, and then they're like, oh, well, tree shaking. But it's not tree shaking because you have to statically analyze the code whether you do it this way or that way. You still have to statically analyze the code. It's that there's a bug, and rather than saying, oh, well, there's this bug that's in the backlog, they're like, well, this magically makes it faster. No, there's a bug in your code, and you don't want to fix the bug, which is perfectly reasonable. But there's nothing magical about destructuring that improves tree shaking. It's the static analysis that improves tree shaking.
Is it fair to say, if you use destructuring, you'll get tree shaking and more bundlers?
That's what?
You'll get, the tree shaking will work in more bundlers if you don't use destructuring.
I don't know. Because
bundlers that are buggy.
we'd have to look at the bundlers.
Well, I care about basically one, and it's TypeScript.
Well, then, yeah, I mean, in that particular case that you're identifying, then sure, I don't have a problem against that. What I have a problem against is where people destructure everything and then they just type a lot more because their names get longer and longer, because instead of you being able to have a person that has a get method and you know, being able to import the person as capital P or whatever, then every single library has a get method. You know, there's something that's very, very common among many libraries. And so then you have all of these one-off functions, and then people start just throwing functions into a file that are unrelated to that file, and because there's no lexical, you know, like grouping, it just becomes anything goes. And then also the other part of that that's slightly different but tangentially related is that you cannot look at something and know where it came from, right? So if I look at P, I can see where, you know, I know that it was person, or if it's called person, I know that it's person. If I see person.get, I know that that's the get person. But if I just see get, because a lot of times people will destructure things that don't stutter, and then they'll just have generic names, not necessarily like get, but maybe, I don't know,
Get hash.
count, sure, get hash, whatever.
Get hash.
But, and so then that's destructured, and then you can't tell where it came from. I mean, I guess it's not that big of a deal, you scroll to the top of the file, but
It is. You don't want to have to scroll. Yeah, I'm 99% with you on destruction. Like, if I have an object that goes
That's
down,
the-
it's kind of levels to the data I want,
-1
I will specify each one in sequence every time I reference it. I'm not going to destruct it. Because that way I can see what the sequence is.
well, and to me, that's a signal
Yeah.
to change.
To not have an object that goes down 10 levels.
Yeah,
In this case, it comes out of an API, so I wouldn't design that myself.
right. I get that. You don't have the choice there, but yeah, don't design something and go down 10 levels. Flat is better than nested. This is one of the truest Python truisms.
You have a bunch of Google Sheets files, and each one has a list of sheets, and each one has different types of properties, like data, and data has a list of rows, right? And rows have different properties, like the values of the values, and the list of cells in that row. The cell has a bunch of different kinds of things. You want the value of that cell. Yeah. This is most of my life.
That sounds way too hard to get.
So,
Are you describing using the Google API?
Google Sheets API, yes.
Which by the way is a chat program. So this is why it's so weird, because all right. So let me explain how Google Sheets came about with this problem.
The main reason, like half of that, is because like it wants you to know not just by the values, but the formatting as well, which is like a different property of the object.
Well, then
I'm not
here's-
sure how I would organize that better myself.
It's literally a chat program. So Google created Google Sheets, and then they created this thing called Google, well actually then they adopted this thing called Jabber, and they created Google Chat. And then they decided that you could do rich, embedded, all the things, and they called that Google Wave. And then the Google Wave team and the Google, what was it called back then, Docs team, collaborated, and Wave died, but Wave was integrated into Google Docs. So what you have is Jabber, Google Chat, Google Wave, Google Docs, and the API that you use to interface, and the reason that a chat program was integrated into a document processor is because they wanted to allow multiple people to work on the document at the same time and
That's
to be able to
one
track edits.
Yeah.
And so what you end up with is a chat protocol that has been abused over 4 or 5 generations that is now
Now a halfway standard spreadsheet.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the point of that was that like, assuming
Okay.
that I didn't commit some
Can I
horrible
unplug
mistake
this?
with like destructuring imports being faster, assuming that that's true, that seems like a pretty strong reason to use import over attaching everything to the window object. It's just annoying.
Sure. So honestly, and certainly I can take a boatload of criticism for this, but if I would, your particular instance that you're describing of Google API, that is something that this does not apply to because it can't. But if I was dealing with that problem, for example, I've dealt with that problem with AWS, I would just re-implement the function that I need.
That was a proof by example.
Structure it, put it back in the object with the name.
This is what I've been thinking the whole time. No, but if it's get, change that to retrieve and stuff like that.
Okay, so
And then you
mentioning
export
that library
that.
was a proof by example. Like I got rid of that library as fast as I could. It's gone. But like because I can see how it works for that, that tells me that it must be faster for other things as well to like destruction things.
Yeah. So yeah, and I don't know what to say. But other than that, it's not a technical problem in the sense that
It's not an unsolved computer science problem.
yeah.
It's just
And
an unsolved
but-
JavaScript ecosystem problem.
But when people talk about it in conference talks, they talk about it as if it's an unsolved computer science problem. Like there's a magical property of imports that when you parse them, you can do tree shaping, and this is not a magical property of imports.
Yes. I am blessed and cursed to know very
Yeah,
little
so
about computer science. I
know
know a lot
how
about
to
JavaScript
figure
ecosystem.
out- I've already figured out the pieces.
yeah,
of it,
so, like-
just like
So
Okay.
the original problem I was getting at was like,
sidetracked
I
into it.
I would
was trying to
ideally
combine
like
too
to be able
much and
to
didn't
import
filter it
the
down.
file
And then
that's
at the last
in the
moment,
npm
I'm like,
package
okay, and you just showed these
that lets
three
me
things.
use import rather than just binding
So
to
I'm
the
like,
window
I didn't
object.
get half.
Because I
that,
avoid binding
I
things to the window
wanted
object where I can.
But
That means I'm digging around inside that package in my node
probably won't do
modules
any more
to find
on
like
the single
which
file
of the several
version.
different
I
JavaScript
like
files in
it
there, maybe
in
100 of
theory,
them,
but
it
in,
depends on the library,
like,
is the
practice,
one
I
that
don't
actually
like
works
how
in
it
browser,
feels.
right?
I
And
don't
as
like
far as I
using
can,
the
as far as I know,
object
there's no
that
standard
it's
pointer to that. Like there's a standard
Yeah,
pointer
that
for what
was-
to use in
that's
Node
weird looking.
because it's Node modules.
But it's cool.
but not
It's
for
cool to
browsers.
see like.
Well, you're
That's
supposed to
amazing.
you're supposed to use the
components.
path.
That was cool.
The default Node path will like
Which, I mean,
take
I
you
just
to the
don't
version that
use
works in
because
Node,
I
which will
like
very
that
often
fact.
fail in browsers.
No, what I mean is in a browser, you're
Technically,
supposed to use the
I
path to
think
the file. You're supposed to use the
simplifying the
relevant
JavaScript
Yes,
file.
But-
yes, and then I
we
have
did-
to
we
figure
did-
out which
all
file.
those
One last
wrappers
thing, we did not clap for
and-
JoJo. Thank you for leading our discussion. Sorry about that. And I would give you a presenter gift, but I think you have every flavor and variety of them. But if there's anything you want, let me know.
Yeah.
Keeps it vanilla.
Hey, those, the SIM card ejectors,
Yeah?
I couldn't charge my phone recently, like as of a week or two ago. And I found it's perfect to like scrape out lint from around your little charger. And now it charged, I thought like I was gonna have to get a new cell phone, it was so bad. Like it would charge, and if I like had it pried just the right way, it would keep charging. But if the cord like moved after 5 minutes, I'd get back and it's like, you have 10% battery. And so I'd like scraped around and I'm like, this is my last chance. It worked like a charm. It charges like so fast now.
Yeah,
I forgot.
I have the same problem solved in the same way with the SIM card tool. Yeah, yeah, that's what they're for.
Dynamite. I liked it.
Well, I am so glad. And if you need more, let me know. I've also got.
You gave me a whole little box. I think I'm good.
I've got more boxes. I think I have 30 boxes.
Wow.
So probably I'm down to like 20 now. But
I never got a pocket knife.
you never had a pocket knife?
Uh-uh.
Let me see if I've got one. I don't think I've got one on me, but let me see. I've got the phone holder thing like this. I've got you've got the pen thing already. Dude, I'll get
What's
more
the
pocket knives.
pen thing? Or
Oh,
that's-
it's just
that's the ejector.
It's the keychain ejector.
Oh, I didn't get a keychain for mine.
Do you want the keychain ejector?
No.
Okay. But I'll get you that. Oh, also another thing. This is rare item. I don't know how many more of these I have, but measuring tape.
I've heard of those before.
Yeah.
What
So
does it measure?
if you want this, You could have this as your presenter gift, or I can get you the knife. Can't believe you never had the knife. Man, that's sad.
The thing is, I wouldn't put it on my
And then just lay
keychain
it on
though.
one line, and then you can measure, say measure.
Well, you put it wherever you want. I'm not here to tell you where you put your knives.
See, I'm very particular about my keychain. I want as little as possible, so I condense it down.
Uh-huh, yep.
And I've already got all my knives and stuff.
Okay, you suggested what sounded like an excellent tip if that actually
So I
applies
have
to
that
what a result would. Which is that like, if
I
there's
was
some kind of
thinking
standard
of
match
actually
file that I can use every time.
Doing that setup
browser
for the
version of every library.
dashboard's UI build, but now I'm like, do
So
I
he-
even need to do that with what AJ's done?
He knows about that, but I just do file path, and I really just don't use other people's
Mix
code
is a
anymore.
map manager.
At this point in my career, I have pretty much written
They use to run.
He's doing
almost
stuff.
everything
I don't know if
that I
you can
need.
see in his videos.
I need some
I've been
stuff.
so
I need
busy
a
researching
PDF
my own
library,
stuff, I'm like,
so
I
Fair.
can't put that
Totally
in
fair.
I
my.
need an Excel, I need Excel
Yeah,
JS.
he's got
Excel
some
files.
things.
GJS?
Yeah, I know, other
That's
than
probably
those
more
books
popular.
are in that, I
This is
know
just the one that was
people
left
working
within the
on
code
those
base, and it's fine.
UIs for
Oh,
the
okay, sure.
RPC.
So I certainly wouldn't want to make my own like
So-
Excel file.
But then, yeah.
Yeah, no. No, I agree. For stuff that's like actual,
To demonstrate.
those are worthy
Dash
of usage.
join, like,
Yeah.
I'm talking about,
And they're big.
Yeah.
They're
yeah, and they are, yeah. No, I'm with you there. I use modules for stuff like that. I just don't use modules for things like
Section to see like, okay.
any of the
now-
stuff that's in the
now
Go
he's
standard
got
library. I
that,
just rewrite the JavaScript and I
basically
have a
building
repository
that,
with all the things that
you
are
know, desktop.
the types of things that would be in the Go standard
Style,
library for
yeah.
JavaScript.
But
Desktop is
it gets
done.
worse than the good stuff.
Browser
Sometimes I'm just like
Yeah.
Windows, as long as you.
rewriting that for someone else made.
Optimize.
That use some library that has some particular effect that isn't necessarily good if they wouldn't want to re-implement it.
It's
I'm
different,
currently
it's a
working on
different
to use this
flavor.
library
like-
called date range picker.
Well, I
It
was
is just
mentioning
like-
design, it's not the
I
way
would not
I
want to
would done
re-implement
it,
that
have
component
it
myself.
designed.
Did you know what you can do?
I know there's a built-in date range picker, but it would look confusing.
Yeah,
I
his
don't want to
is
mess up.
like-
our system.
Terminal and a browser.
Designed for like.
So-
And this library
You have
requires
one-
jQuery.
We're now done.
And
and
yours
Moment.
is
So
designed
stuck with
more
those two.
step by step and it's.
So for all my date
Modal,
needs, I'm
so
gonna
it's
use
like
Moment
another
and
app.
Snap.
No,
His
no,
is
dude,
more-
let me show you this. I may have shown you this before,
So I think there's
but
a good place
this,
for both of them.
let me show you what you can do. This is like 100 lines of code, and adding it instead of Moment is probably better than using Moment.
No, but I'm stuck with that because it's a required dependency of date range picker, which is a component that I do not want to re-implement.
Right, but you don't. But that doesn't mean that you have to use it, right?
Well, I don't necessarily have to use Moment, but like it's kind of nice occasionally. I use like date for most of the stuff. But a few other things.
So
You're still.
Like it's more semantics to add a day through Moment than to
I
add.
want to be,
Laptop
but
screen,
I
though.
probably,
alright, let's see. There we go. XTZ.
Will you see those laptops?
So let's see. Does this have the?
Yeah.
Oh man, the light on the TV just
tomorrow,
kills
as
me.
after I did the math.
Okay.
No, the math was.
So-
For me to get.
XTZ uses datetime format, get time zone offset,
After I was doing.
And
That's awesome.
stuff.
B, why?
one of the other things, and it has all the time zones.
It's
Right?
ready to
Okay.
claim something tomorrow.
If you needed to do something tens of thousands of times a second, it's slow. The reason for that is that it's a call down to the operating system to use TZDB.
Okay.
Oh my,
Like,
that's so.
But,
what's it called?
or however, they've re-implemented for the browser, but they're not, somebody has
You did bring it.
the polyfill for that,
What you want.
and it's something insane, like 34 megabytes.
Yeah, the commission.
But
My main
it's-
point here is I gotta use
My
libraries.
commission on whatever he's paid.
I cannot get around using libraries for almost any professional
I'm
project.
still
I can
planning
think
to
of,
do more
because
work.
I'm probably
even if that
interfacing with
works out
something
in
that I don't want to
budget.
re-implement at some point.
I.
Maybe it's
still
not
planning
like
to do
the server
work
side
based
rendering. Maybe I can do that
on,
myself.
you
Maybe I can
know,
make my server
commissions,
myself.
Because
But like,
commissions were, I need.
I'm probably interfacing with something I don't want.
And that's kind of the situation.
I'm just gonna say that most of the time you don't need it,
Yeah.
I prefer to stay with assembly.
but sometimes the amount of time that it takes to understand it, to know you don't need it, maybe isn't worth it. So I'm gonna give you an example here.
So I might,
Clear.
maybe I'll just call you tomorrow and
We're doing x86, ARM, what we go?
3 months.
Let's see.
Yeah, I do all.
This is 11. Oh, you know what? I should have just done.
I would very much like surround my own, framework. I think it actually
No, I
is
actually
just
don't
like
really
what I saw.
He had his
Like,
last
there's
See,
something
like-
there about-
Amazon warehouse
Yeah.
All of the
today.
frameworks are
I forgot to look at it last time. Yeah.
all of the
I can
frameworks are
probably,
I wouldn't even bother with that. What I really want to try is
Is comfortable with.
a really basic